Waking up inside a world I don't recognize. You're playing it cool, but I can't get you off my mind. Just suck it up, I gotta do what I can to get back to you, back to all that we had. Galaxies far and wide, I'd go anywhere. It's gonna be alright. Ain't nobody holding me back. You know I'm coming for you. Ain't nobody stopping me now. You know you're gonna be mine. Yeah, it's gonna be alright.
Justice sucks. Recharge.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Samurai Punk and Justice Sucks panel for MIGW 2021. Is it 2021? I can't even tell anymore. We are some members of Samurai Punk. We'll do a little intro round after this. But we're going to be talking about Justice Sucks, Rumbo First Blood, and some of the history of Samurai Punk and how this game came to be. I've got some panel members with me. I'll let everyone else introduce themselves first. Start with you, Siren.
I'm Siren Guillaume. I'm the art director at Samurai Punk. Been here for almost 5 years, and yeah, been having a blast working on Justice Sucks.
Mitch.
Mitchell Pasmans. I'm the sound and music fella, and I've been working full time for about a year and on and off for a couple of years before that.
Winston.
Yep. My name's Winston Tang, creative director at Samurai Punk. I'm old blood there from the beginning. Since the beginning, since before the stars were even formed. What the fuck do I do? I come up with silly ideas and I try to convince people to make them, and then we make cool games together.
Awesome. And I'm Nicholas McDonald. I'm the co-founder, and I mostly do design and like I'm a generalist these days, but our roles are pretty weird as managers. It's pretty silly. So before we kick on and talk about Justice Sucks, which is the game we're working on right now and the game we're sort of showing during MIGW and during all these other events, I wanted to introduce the sort of prequel, the spiritual prequel to this game, which is Rumbo First Blood. A game that's very dear to all our hearts. All the four of us all worked on it back in, was the end of 2019, I believe. But yeah, Winston,
2018, I think.
2018? What? Okay. Winston, just let us know, like, what is First Blood?
Yeah, gladly. So it has its origins from many years even before 2018. So I'll try to give a compressed version of the story, but basically back in 2014, I was just chilling. I think we were making Screen Sheet at the time. Came home from work and I saw cop cars outside my house, and I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be good." Turns out we got burglarized, which was pretty harrowing. But when we got in, the police were there, and then nobody really knew what happened. But the robot vacuum that we had was just like casually like bumping around. And I don't know. I guess the image was burned into my mind of the robot vacuum trying to do something as the burglars busted in and were stealing our shit. That was the first swear.
Second.
Start a counter. Sorry, second. Jesus.
The most Australian panel that I guess it's all Australian panels, so it's gonna be pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, hectic. So I kind of had that image burned into my brain, and especially so because they never actually caught the culprits, which is unfortunate, but kind of got me thinking, like, yeah, what if the robot vacuum cleaner just ate them, and that's why they were never found? So
technically, that means
couple years
the vacuum cleaner
what's that?
All your valuables as well. Everything that was stolen was also in the
possibly. I guess the people were carrying them as they were being eaten, so it all just got ground up into dust. So when we emptied the dustbin that day, we're just like, why are there all these bloody chunks? Like, this is weird. Didn't really think too much of it at the time. But a couple of years down the line, Humble Bundle, they invited us to make something for their Humble Originals program. And we had a few ideas thrown around. I think at the time we were pitching them the game where you poop on a snake. But that wasn't destined to be. Instead, they wanted the game about the the robot vacuum in a Home Alone scenario where it's fighting off burglars. So we were given the opportunity to build that up, and yeah, in a very short amount of time and in a tiny budget, I think we gave ourselves 6 weeks to develop this game from start to finish. We put together what ultimately became Rumbo First Blood. And that kind of laid the foundation for what Justice Sucks is. So it's like a stealth action game where you play as a robot vacuum that uses a hacking ability to control gadgets and like robots and things in its environment, hurts bad guys, makes them spill copious amounts of blood. You then eat that blood, and then you can unleash your like special abilities on them. So this is where I can show the very earliest, I guess, proof of concept that we had.
So this even like 2 weeks in, or
maybe 1.5 weeks.
Yeah, something like that.
I don't think this has been shown publicly. Maybe it
Not very openly, only on our Discord. Shout out to the Discord, discord.gg/samuraiPunk for all the exclusive gossip.
Wow.
I love the dirt counter in the corner. It's very relevant information to lay out.
Is this with ray tracing on, or?
Oh yeah.
Can't you tell?
Yeah.
God, the movement. Dusty, as like before he was even called Dusty. This is and the model obviously is as you can see, a very highly detailed cylinder.
We're all about high fidelity, so we wanted to push it on this proof of concept. I always get a bit of a shock when I look at the art of the different iterations of the game from back then till now. Like, it's always a big shock for me. The music. I forgot about the music.
Is that the Homer being hidden over the chair sound?
Yes, it is. So also shout outs to our placeholder audio from The Simpsons and Deus Ex.
Hopefully we can't. This isn't on YouTube, so we can't get copyright strike.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so do you want to close that down and then we'll?
Oh, it's just getting good though. Wait, hang on. Let me skip to the end because I think we do the RAM. I think we do the RAM at the end.
Oh my god, the animations are so bugged out.
Perfect.
Oh, it's that video, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna roll the trailer for First Blood so you can see that back to back.
Mm. Incredible.
Wow, what a trailer! What a difference though. Like, even between those two, because now after this we'll show you Justice Sucks. But like, and then Mitch will play it while we talk about Justice Sucks. But like, before we even dive into Justice Sucks, like, what was really cool about that game to each of you? Like, and how do you feel like what systems do you think from that first game like have improved the most going into Justice Sucks?
I'll just go first. I think, first and foremost, obviously the visuals have gone so they're so much better than it used to be. Obviously that's the difference between having 6 weeks versus having,
Over
a year and a half to 2 years or whatever. That does help. And also, I was basically working by myself on this game in terms of the environments. We had one person doing the character, but as far as assets, that was all me in 5 weeks, which is a lot of work for one person. But everything else in terms of DUI, Anything that is visual has just gone, to a different level, and especially the blood that we sort of like implemented in the first game. It was really good, and it was really gory in a Tarantino kind of way. But I think the new iteration that we have is much more stylistic and consistent with the aesthetic of the game. So I'm really happy about that improvement specifically. And then I guess the general polish of the game is incredible compared to what it used to be. Again, more time, more money always helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you other two? Mitch?
Well, like sound and music wise, like I was working on First Blood in like my spare time while I worked at a liquor store to pay bills, and like so we rushed it out. Like we gave it our all in our limited time, and it was good. And there was some like really funny music and sound effects in there. But like having the time to work on Justice Sucks is like there's so much more stuff that we've been able to do, and it sounds and looks really good.
We got a vocal theme song for this game.
We do.
Yeah, it's pretty high.
Went all the way.
What about you, Winston? Anything you're like really proud of, as in like a progression?
Yeah, gosh. I guess it's like a kind of holistic thing, because I think Rumbo First Blood kind of set this promise of here's some wacky stuff you can do as a robot vacuum. And there was this really funny dynamic. I guess it was like a modern like Tom and Jerry kind of thing, like cat and mouse, but made for, I guess, people in our age group who are starting to get like a Google Home or like a thing where you can tell your light switch to turn on. It was really fun to play with that idea in just like a contemporary setting. But building it out into Justice Sucks, we've been able to like flesh out so many more of the systems and like amp up the visuals and the theming so much. Like it proves that it was more than just like a one-off gag. That there's actually a really fun and unique experience behind all of it. So everything's good.
So I guess with that, I'm gonna roll the trailer for Justice Sucks so you can see what we're talking about. So here it is.
I'm looking up inside a world I don't recognize. Playing it cool, but I can't get you off my mind. Just suck it up, I gotta do what I can to get back to you, back to all that we had. Galaxies far and wide, I'd go anywhere. It's gonna be alright, ain't nobody holding me back. You know I'm coming for you. Ain't nobody stopping me now. You know you're gonna be mine. Yeah, it's gonna be alright.
Justice Sucks. Recharge.
Now we've seen the trailer. Winston, do you want to tell us, like, I mean, we're gonna talk about a bunch of things, and Mitch is gonna start playing. But what is, I mean, in the context of First Blood as well? I guess, what is Justice Sucks?
What is Justice Sucks? Everybody grab a glass of whiskey for some therapy sessions. It's a lot of things. I think as a studio, we were like trying to find ourselves in the start of, I think during 2019,
Yeah.
we were trying to find ourselves in quite a few ways. We hadn't had like a really successful game since Screen Sheet. I think we had some cool experimental stuff that was niche and like had its audience, but we were trying to figure out like, what are we gonna do next? And Rumbo honestly was looking like it was another one of those like little niche things. But when we put it out on consoles, people started to care a lot more about it, because it started out as like a free, humble thing, and then on Steam. But yeah, when we put it out on Switch, we got a lot more traction. with audiences and legal teams. Oh, excuse me. That you can edit that out. But yeah, people cared about it. So I know for a lot of us at the studio, and definitely me, I care a lot about making things that people really care about, like something that resonates with them or something that they believe is special and deserves to exist as like an experience within this medium. But Roomba First Blood was tiny. It's like you finish the game in half an hour.
Well, that's
So, or yeah, even less. I think the top speed run beat it in 6 minutes, maybe. But yeah, a bunch of team members came together and we challenged ourselves to be like, if we had the opportunity to make a full game based on this concept of Roomba First Blood, what would we do with it? What are the things that we would fix? What are the things that we would improve? What are new areas that we could explore? Yeah, we just kind of started building from there. We knew we had this foundation of like robot vacuum killing bad guys, which was funny and it had some like fun gameplay mechanics in there. And then we branched out. It was a lot of experimenting with stuff because I think we went wide with ideas, and then we came back in, and then we went a bit wide again, and it's a constant elastic experience of trying to find like what is the most we can do with this experience and deliver something that is ultimately satisfying to the players out there and fulfills that original promise. First Blood.
I think with that, Mitch, you're already he's on it. Look at this boy.
Yeah, I know my time.
So Mitch is just gonna like start playing, and I'm gonna keep asking questions. So Mitch is gonna have to do double duty here. So he's gonna program it. So this is Justice Sucks. I think I said Justice Blood in action. Justice Blood recharged. And Mitch is just playing through the tutorial. And yeah, so for everyone on the team, and I guess I'll just start. Favorite things that you've worked on, and a favorite thing that someone else has worked on this title. For me, this is gonna tie in with another question, but for me, the favorite thing was actually working on Dusty himself. It's not pictured in this particular build, but it will be in the build that people are playing on PAX right now, which is awesome. But we put a lot of work into really bringing Dusty himself to life compared to the first game. In the first game, he had a couple of facial expressions, but otherwise he was fairly static. And with the help of Callum, our character artist, and Syrian, we were able to really keep the fantasy of the fact that he is a robot vacuum cleaner who's like fixed to the ground, but also really, inject a lot of personality into that like very simple model. And for me, the thing I'm really like keen on in this game is the cinematics and just the wacky jank that I think we embrace within. Like, it's one of those really cool things of like just like being like, this is the box we're working in, and this is what we're going to execute within that box. I'm just going to turn the stream down a bit. It's a little loud. I guess Syrian, what about you? What was your favorite?
So my favorite thing to work on for this game, I would actually say working on the environments, and very, very similar to what you said about the character, bringing them to life and making them feel like a living space, like a living, breathing space, something that you could actually visit, something that you could see in real life, while maintaining that sort of wacky fantasy aspect. Yeah, that was probably the most interesting challenge for me. Because obviously it is still a video game, and there are a lot of design constraints that we have to take into account, like, the size of the space and how tight it has to be. Because you're not a humanoid character, you don't have a lot of space. Also, rather, if you have too much space to maneuver around, it becomes a little bit more tricky to make it fun. And I think bringing that perspective into the game, it was just really fun to design spaces that you could sort of murder people into in a fun way. It was basically an excuse to come up with the craziest, traps and hackable items in the game. We have different settings, like we have a nightclub, for instance, and yeah, just working on all those different levels with those really, really different aesthetics, different lighting, was really, really awesome. And I am super thrilled to see that it looks really, really good. Not even just comparing it to the previous game, but just on its own, it just looks very good and very, very bright and bubbly. So I think that was probably my favorite aspect of the game. Yeah.
What about something that someone else worked on?
Ooh, someone else. Okay, it's really hard to choose actually because there's so many aspects to this game that are really, really good. Like the UI looks amazing. The cinematics are hilarious. I think personally, but I think the sound design in general and how much personality the sound and the music bring to this game. It's just incredible to me. Like every time I use the menus, I'm just cracking up.
If I could add a second thing, it's Mitch's menu sounds when you're going through the different dialogues. Yep. Oh, here's an example of those cutscenes though. Yeah, even for a whip, like they just. There's, by the way, this guy is like a friend of the company. He's a graphic designer who did the logo for the game. There's a bit of a deep lore for the Justice Subs.
Thanks. Yeah.
Winston or Mitch, what about you guys?
Well, obviously there's the vocal theme song that we collaborated with Monster Mansion, Jacob Delaney, super talented fella. We wanted to make like a 90s inspired pop song in the vein of like Backstreet Boys and Britney Spears, and I really feel like we knocked it out of the park.
Yeah,
like
you guys totally
it's
killed it.
That like cheesy sort of like 90s attitude thing came out really well, so that was super fun to work on. Otherwise, like I'll never get sick of that feeling of like vacuuming up an enemy and like the chainsaw and the crunch and everything. Like it just sounds fun.
Yeah.
Favorite thing someone else worked on, obviously I gotta shout out the like level design and the massive jump that it is from the first game, and how like everything in it has a consistent tone. Like it's like colorful and bubbly and fun and like really cohesive through the entire thing. I think it looks neat. Sorry, I'm trying to answer while also killing these here burglars.
You're doing alright.
You're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
My turn.
Yeah.
I think what was the favorite thing that I worked on? I think the early prototyping was really fun initially because it kind of spawned a lot of what we see in the final product. The special abilities, because in the first game we only had the ramming ability, but in this one we introduced like different tiers. So you have like some utilities, some damage stuff, and then you have the like kind of ultimate ability. But doing the sexy punch ability was super fun because it was the first time we really did like any kind of cinematic effects in our game, because like there's like some camera effects and like, field of view shift and stuff, which was cool. But that also opened the door to actually making the in-game cinematics as well. Because like Nick kind of briefly mentioned, but we are working with pretty restrictive resources. We don't have a dedicated animator on the team, so you might be wondering how the hell do we make cinematics with that? They're all just canned animations of like people doing gestures. So I feel like I looked into it at some point, but I think it's a Shakespearean theater thing where the actors have to do like massive gestures to communicate because people view from
puppeteering kind of vibe.
Yeah. It's a unique look. Because I also have to try to communicate as much as I can in the cinematics without any dialogue as well. So everybody's just like gesturing and overacting, but it creates this like really funny, surreal atmosphere.
Yeah. Like Charlie Chaplin silent film sort of thing.
Yeah. So that was really fun. In terms of other things, I think this is kind of like the best answer that I can give is like when all the aspects of like the sandbox of the game kind of come together. That was when I knew that there was something special with the game, when you have like a funny scenario where like you're in a toilet and then a character, like one of the NPCs like runs in, and then a thief will run in as well. You make the toilet explode. This person flies over, lands on their ass, and then that guy keeps running at you. You punch him, he flies into his friend, and you have this like chain reaction of events happening in a space with all the sound and the visuals coming together. That's really fun because in some of the previous games that we made, you would get like accidental moments happening, and they were funny, but they were like bugs. You know, it's like you see a ragdoll like glitching out, or like I don't know, in Feather, I don't know, you get like the bird would just be in like weird positions, and it was funny, but the game wasn't meant to do that. But Justice Sucks is a lot about those. It is about those funny moments and trying to make as many of those happen as a player. So yeah, I was really happy when I see that kind of thing happening, and hopefully when people play, they can make a lot of funny moments themselves as well.
Yeah. Sorry, we're just enjoying Daniel Sun's cinematic here. Super Sun Studios helped us out producing this. He actually worked on the first game as well. He did the opening cinematic for Rumbo First Blood. So moving on from that, I guess kind of like, what was everyone's biggest challenge? And I don't want to restrict this just to Justice Sucks, but like, yeah, working on this game or other games we've done, and keep it away from quarantine, because that's the easy option.
Yeah, no quarantine stuff.
Yeah.
We're sick of it.
No one needs that. Who wants to go first?
Okay, so biggest challenge, right, on this game? Wow, that's a hard one. I guess working within the limitations that we had, as in resource-wise, we obviously, like Winston mentioned, we didn't have an animator, which made it really tricky because we had to rely on Mixamo mostly, which is that Adobe service that provides free animations, which does the job, you know, it gets the job done, but getting that level of polish that we wanted within the constraints of the studio, that was probably one of the hardest things. And sort of like making sure that we don't spend too much time on the details, you know, like the structure of the game had to be solid. And I think it's very easy as a game dev to get stuck into polish really quickly, and then losing track of the bigger picture. So just maintaining that consistency across the board was really, really difficult, but I think it was totally worth it.
Yeah. Mitch has just gotten to a new level here, which is awesome. And we also just saw the intro of Sexy McLean, who is Winston. What is Sexy McLean?
What is Sexy McLean?
What is it?
So I get Sexy McLean is a manifestation of your fighting spirit, or for anybody who knows JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, he's basically a stand. It's a spirit that comes out of you and can fight and support you. The origin of it was we wanted to make a T-shirt for Rumbo First Blood, but just the image of the robot by itself, we weren't sure if that was going to be exciting or sexy enough. So one of our illustrator friends, Q-Tori, he worked with us, and I think we were just brainstorming ideas, and we were like, oh, what if we made the robot vacuum like really sexy, like a JoJo character? So there's a T-shirt out there. There are a few in the wild of like big, muscular, Sexy McLean going like this, I think. And people loved it. So when we got a chance to make a second game, that was one of the first things that I wanted to get in. It was like, you know what? Yeah, big, sexy robot vacuum. Let's fucking do it. How many swears are we at now?
About 4.
But yeah, he also enables Dusty to... or like the player and Dusty to do a lot more, because he's like a humanoid character who can use his hands and legs for things. So it kind of empowers the player in other ways and allows for more comedy in the cinematics as well. Yeah. Top bloke.
I don't know if anyone else got their like toughest challenge working on this game?
We did decide pretty early on in production that we wanted the game to be 90s influenced, or like basically the games have been like doing the 80s aesthetic for a while now, like with synthwave and like a bunch of other like that really 80s
There's been
aesthetic.
A lot of 80s
You know
games.
the one. You've seen the 80s. Yeah. And so we wanted to like mix it up a little bit and like try something new. And for me, as like doing the music, trying to work out what the 90s sounded like specifically was very hard to do. Just because like
I think we also have these really weird memories of it, especially because a lot of the team are like 90s kids, right? So we don't like know. When we think about 90s, what we're also the conversation is always like, oh, that song from the 90s, and we're like, no, that was 2002,
Yeah.
right? It's like, oh.
Or
Yeah.
the reverse problem where someone has a very, very specific 90s reference that no one else has seen. It's like,
And
oh
you have to
god.
be like, oh yeah, because you were in that subculture at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for like some people, the 90s was like grunge music and Nirvana,
Yeah.
and other people it was like Aqua and like
Like 1-2 be a master.
yeah.
That was me.
So like trying to consolidate all that together into like one aesthetic was like hard to do.
Especially while you're playing the game at the same time.
Yeah, it's getting hectic in here.
Yeah, but this is
Um,
yeah, this is an interesting level.
Yeah, because I think if I can touch on briefly with the 80s stuff, I think because it had become so popular and ubiquitous, there was like this caricature version of the 80s
Yeah,
that everybody was replicating. So it was a really easy template to copy if you're doing 80s stuff.
yeah, because
The
it's been
90s, we-
filtered down already into like
Yeah.
a very specific thing.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, with the 90s, you were kind of learning how to distill it on the fly.
Yeah.
Mm.
So basically, it ended up mostly just using like the Space Jam soundtrack, the classic soundtrack, and then like there was some like late '90s pop stuff like Britney Spears and others.
Others.
Like. And then there's like early like 2 Unlimited and that like early dance music with like the orchestra hits and early techno. It's just all mixed together and then blended into, I think, a pretty good soundtrack so far.
Yeah, I think what you've also done, Mitch, really well is you've integrated the sounds or the hits like from a lot of the like club bangers
Yeah.
into the like if you just like fiddle around with the UI here, like these sounds are coming from that because you're the sound designer and the composer, right? You're able to get
Yeah.
those two things across really well, which I really love. I think that's like one of my favorite things. If I can touch on a challenge, for me, it was I'm watching just Mitch played like the new content here. It was actually transitioning from the design logic of the first game to the design logic of the second game, where the first game took place in the house. You were defending a home. The only mission, as it were, was home defense. So you were defending a space that you sort of owned. There were no other people around. And we only had one objective, which was like stop the enemies from collecting these objects before they leave the house. 2, spaces the player was foreign to, but there were other friendlies there. And having to find game modes that actually made sense within that context and were potentially superior. So what we found was that when we transitioned content away from the home space, a more offensive style of gameplay, like closer like a Metal Gear kind of level, where we refer to it as like the base mode as elimination, which is a mode where there are enemies on the map already, and the player is attacking that space and they're stealthily trying to kill everyone. We found that like that base, like it was like a complete flip, where like instead of as almost like a tower defense, it became more like an offensive stealth game. And trying to wrangle all the mechanics within that framework and be like, well, we want to maintain this like home defense mechanic. Like you can see Mitch is playing Invasion, which is what we refer to as the home defense mode, but he's playing Invasion on the restaurant level. But you could also play like an offensive level like he just played before, which is Rescue, where he was rescuing the family members. And that was more like an infiltration. So it's like having the mechanics work and solve problems in both modes was really tough. And trying to add more mechanics than we had in the first game. So we've extended a lot of systems, especially Mitch isn't playing with a lot because I know he's not like aggressive like I am with it. But the suck and shoot system, which is a great name. But when you can suck up objects in the world, some of them are interactive, some of them you can shoot back out. Well, most of them you can shoot back out and use them as like a projectile. And trying to turn the whole world into a weapon, not just the hackables. So because you had all these hackables in the first game, but then everything else was fairly static. And it was kind of more at the designer's whim of whether or not you were able to execute a combo. Now it's more at the player's. What we, like Winston talked about before, we wanted to give player more agency within the sort of systems and give player more ability to remix the content through their playstyle. So that for me, that was what was really tough working on this game, and we're still wrangling with these problems now and trying to improve them.
Yeah, because this style of game is still pretty new to us.
Yeah.
Like as developers, we haven't.
Well, every genre of game is new to us.
Yeah, pretty
Especially
much.
this game, because it's like there's not really a game to compare it to in terms of genre. Like the closest comparison is like Hitman,
but
which is
just barely.
yeah, it's like action stealth, but mostly using environmental traps. And
And the player doesn't have
vacuuming.
one thing this doesn't have that every other stealth game has is a kill button. Like every stealth game has it. Like it took me like 6 months to realize that like why isn't this game like sometimes because the stealth in this game doesn't work the way it does in other games. I was like, why can't the player just like quickly clear a room? It's like, oh well, they don't have the execute or they don't have the like knockout button that every other stealth game has.
Yeah. You can't sneak up behind someone and then do a stealth takedown or anything.
And we implemented it and it just like totally flipped the mechanics on their head and be like, okay, well this is now just makes everything else inferior. So working within this constraint of like it's about utilizing the environment made it kind of feel. I think the cool thing is it makes it feel different and unique. But it is a really unique challenge because you can't draw on other games to solve those problems as easily.
Yeah, I guess that kind of links to one of the biggest challenges for me, which is trying to simultaneously figure out ourselves what is most special about this game, and then communicating that to players in a way that they understand. Because there are so many things going on, and it meant that people could play the game in a lot of different ways. Because, for example, you can play it in a very sneaky way, or you can just go on a wild goose chase. Both experiences are kind of fun, but it only kind of in the most recent months when we've been playtesting the game more and getting it into more people's hands who have never played the game before. Did we realize that there are, because this game is different, people don't have established gaming habits or like player habits that they can bring into this very easily. So people can very easily just play the game completely wrong or in a way that is not as enjoyable. So the challenge is, how do we distill down what's the best kind of experience they can have, or like, best few kind of experiences, and then teach them the new habits. Because it really, in a lot of ways, there's not that much prior knowledge that you can bring to this. So you're really starting from scratch as a player playing this. And it's cool to be able to make those experiences, but it's really challenging to teach people how to get into them.
And it has led into like a lot of debate over like the difficulty of the game, because there's like nothing to compare it to, and you can't really bring in prior like game skills or anything.
Even someone who would consider themselves like a hardcore gamer, right, can approach this game and still struggle with it initially.
Yeah,
because they are confronted with it being like, okay, it's top down and it contains violence and action, so it'll play like an action game. And then you're like, no. Well, there's all these other things you need to consider and you need to learn before you can.
That's the thing, right? Even among us, discussing the different systems, it was really interesting to see how, depending on our playstyles, our personal preferred playstyles, we would all have different systems that we liked. Like, you always use the suck and shoot, Nick.
I use it a
Whereas
lot.
I never touch it because I hate it. And then Kellen might just be using the dash constantly, or the abilities more. And everyone had a different playstyle.
Yeah, and then we have to support that as well, like at the design level. Yeah. We have to allow the systems to all work and be equally fun, and make sure that you can. I mean, what's important to me is like trying to the ideal. Like, I guess people in most games refer to the golden path, but now it's like the golden experience. Is like, we want to let the player know that these systems exist. We want to teach them how to use them, and then we want to encourage you to mix and match them in a way that is like most satisfying.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. So going into some more specific stuff, Syrian, did you want to talk about the inspiration behind specific maps and why we are doing the maps the way we are doing them?
Okay, yeah. It was a bit of a weird process, but we started with, obviously we wanted to have the house from the first game, so the first level of the game currently is still the same house, just revamped with the current graphics. The other levels, they started out as a cruise ship, so most of the game was supposed to happen on a cruise ship.
Which we're basically playing on right now.
Yeah, and restaurant is basically the one level specifically that is supposed to be on a cruise ship. But I think when designing the environment and sort of prototyping, we realized that many different places on a cruise ship are very big and open, like the sun deck, and that made designing the game quite difficult. And also the story sort of evolved, and yeah, we decided to sort of move into a more like open-ended sort of design where you just go and travel to different places, and yeah, that kind of gave us the option to do whatever we wanted as far as design. We didn't have to stay constrained to a cruise ship. So the third level is a nightclub. The fourth level is an airport. We also wanted to take more cues from 90s, movies and games. So sort of like Die Hard, that kind of vibe. Sort of schlocky action vibes as much as we could. And I think that's how we ended up in this really fun space where you could just have any sort of level that you wanted, as long as you had an excuse for, this is a very 90s thing. Let's put it in the game. Yeah, kind of process behind it.
Mitch, you did kind of already touch on this a little bit, but like, what were the major inspirations for the existing soundtrack? Like, what were the touchstones that you keep going back to?
So, originally we lent pretty heavily into making it sound like Aqua and Venga Boys. And it wasn't really working, mostly because like that music was like really upbeat and like cheerful, and it was sort of clashing with it being mostly a stealth game and like an action game. So eventually like Syrian said, we went more for that like cheesy 90s action movie vibe and tried to work in like the 90s elements and that like specific 90s aesthetic that the soundtrack of those had. Sorry, I'm focusing on the game too much. I'll hide that.
You're doing pretty good, especially considering the bug I can see with the NPCs are loading twice. Yeah.
Oh my god.
We have a cloning situation on our hands.
The fucking party.
This is the great bug that this game encounters. Like,
yeah, and it's like trying to find out like when, because there's a lot of parts of the 90s. This might be a controversial opinion for a lot of people. A lot of elements of 90s music are bad and should have stayed in the 90s. Like from like a production standpoint, like people had just discovered how to like program drums and make things more digitally. So they're like, hell yeah, let's like make this drum beat perfectly on the beat and have it be like a perfect drum beat, and then realize that sounds bad. Just sounds like a robot playing drums. And we sort of leaned out of that coming into the early 2000s, but like trying to decide when to use that sound to be referential to the 90s without having the soundtrack just end up being bad or like hard to listen to. So yeah, trying to find that balance between the music being referential and still good was probably a tricky thing to do for the soundtrack.
Actually, very, very similar to that on the art side. It's kind of the same thing with visuals, where the 90s are full of, the very, very kind of busy patterns and really ugly, early 3D, early internet style, and trying to get that sort of like, we want the 90s, but not ugly.
We want it to look like the 90s, but we don't want it to look like a reboot.
And that's where
that TV show.
Yeah, and that's where the idea of the neo 90s aesthetic sort of came through. Just taking the elements that we liked and making them look good and more graphic designing. Yeah.
Taking like a modern spin on like the 90s nostalgia, sort of.
Yeah.
Winston, for you, like, what was the driving force between, like, besides the limitations that we had, like, where are you drawing inspiration for the existing cinematics?
I think It's an interesting combination, but I think it is a combination of my prior interest as a child in anime and Mr. Bean. Because Mr. Bean, he barely talks, right, and they have to communicate a lot through action. And we didn't want to have like lots of dialogue and voice acting in this game, and we wanted the character to kind of communicate a lot through just like the situations that they were in. It was like a bit of anime, a bit of Mr. Bean, and Wall-E in particular.
Just to touch on that, I'll do the sexy punch now. So demonstrate.
Yeah, so stuff like that is like making things really punchy and like visually engaging. Because I know cutscenes can be pretty contentious, so I wanted to make things that were light and entertaining, but still communicated enough about what we needed to for the characters and the spaces. I think kind of equipped with that inspiration, I just tried to have fun with them. I knew what I needed to communicate, and then just like what are some silly things that we can do? What's some like interesting imagery that we can pull from? I mean, I would be fascinated to work with like a dedicated animator, but the process with using Mixamo animations is pretty interesting as well, because sometimes you'll be looking for a certain gesture, and then you'll see something else that then spawns a new idea. It's like an organic process of just like trying to make something fun that also communicates what it has to.
Okay, so I think one more question before we wrap up. But if anyone here could compare Justice Sucks to another game, if we could try, what game would you compare it to?
Okay, I know I've said this many times, to the rest of you, but Dishonored is what comes to mind. Just because of you have different abilities, you have many, many different playstyles, so you can achieve the same goal in different ways. And I guess the kind of like immersive sim potential of the game and how different players have different possibilities is kind of what comes to mind. So I would say like Dishonored with a sprinkle of Hitman is what I would say.
Because it is like it's got some of the Hitman elements of like using the environment to like kill people, but it's also got a lot more like sandboxy stuff, like a goat game or like a something like that. So it's sort of like this weird mashup between those two. It's really hard to describe because it's got a lot more freedom than a lot of other stealth games. Like you can solve anything any way you want, really, or you can just not stealth at all and just zoop around shooting stuff at people. Yeah, it's hard to explain.
For me, I think there are a few things that come to mind. But lately I've been thinking Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, which it was like the PSP game that got a HD re-release, but I think that game in particular, I bring it up because Metal Gear, of course, is a stealth action game, but Peace Walker really leaned into this kind of experience of like bite-sized experimental gameplay. Because the previous Metal Gear games were really like, it was like a linear experience. You go through the story, but Peace Walker has these little missions where it's just like, go do this weird thing, go do this weird thing, go do this weird thing. And that was when they were experimenting more with sandboxy gameplay. I think Peace Walker is fucking sweet. I think it's an underappreciated gem. So anybody out there, fans of Metal Gear Peace Walker, I think you'll enjoy Justice Sucks as well.
When we eventually get the PC port of Metal Gear.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Until then, Justice Sucks.
Yeah. For me, it's a bit of a... I was going to say this is a deep cut, but this is a bit of a weak cut. I think it resembles Goose Game.
It's got a bit of Goose Game in it.
And I think it might just be that it's like... It delivers a hyper-specific fantasy. That would be it for me. Like, I think systemically it's like quite unlike other games. I mean, it has bits and pieces of other games. Like, for the longest time, me and Winston had this joke that we were going to do a game jam called Let's Make Watch Dogs But Fun.
Oh yeah.
Because Watch Dogs 1 at the time was a bit of an underwhelming title, and I was very excited for it because I'm like, hack things and do stuff to the world. That's great. And the initial trailers were really exciting. And they only really got to that potential in later games. But even then, those titles are still about like you kill a dude with a gun.
Yeah.
So yeah, like the hyper specific fantasy of being like a robot vacuum cleaner interconnected with all these systems, like with like the Wi-Fi home, but then also they're like defending the innocence from bad people, is what we're trying to deliver. And I Goose Game, if anything, is about being an asshole. It's a way for people to be an asshole without accepting the fact. So I didn't mind that game. But yeah, it's very specific, right?
It's an anti-Goose Game.
I'm not anti.
It's the yin to the yang of Goose Game.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like if the goose actually killed people, which it could. That's the sequel. When they that's the end game, right? Is it summon?
If House wants that game to be made, let's talk. Like, yeah.
You have our email.
Yeah.
So with that, I think we've talked enough about like what this thing is. The demo is available on Steam right now, so please go check it out. If you aren't already on the page, it is Justice Sucks Recharged. Please give us a wish list. We would appreciate that greatly, and we're coming out sometime soon. It says sucking soon on the Steam page, and that is all we can say for now. It still says sucking soon. Yeah, the amount of suck puns in this in development actually is criminal. You can follow us. So we are Samurai Punk everywhere. If you look for us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Twitch, Discord, join our Discord server. It's discord.gg/SamuraiPunk. That's where we do most of our like community stuff. So we're always hanging out there, playing games, chatting, talking about food. I've been Nicholas. Thank you, everyone, and thanks to the viewers. And I hope you have a lovely day wherever you are in the world.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Cheers.